It is time to say good afternoon and check in with Amanda Lang, CTV News Chief Financial Correspondent. So, Amanda, thank you for being here, by the way.
Happy Friday.
I want to, and the same to you. I want to start with trying to find the right word to describe markets these days. So you look at the U.S., and we talked about this in the past. I kind of feel like we're waiting for the next shoe to drop, but it just hasn't happened yet. I know inflation numbers are up a little bit, not enough to spook markets. What do you think? I mean, is this still the scenario of waiting for the next shoe to drop?
I think it is, and I think, you've identified a really interesting situation, which is that stock markets need information. They need real information. And so we do see investors reacting to fear and worry, and that's when markets sell off. We've kind of gotten over that since April with all of the tumult, and now you just have investors looking through a lot of this. Now, the question that raises is, does that mean the markets are not pricing in the things that they should be pricing in? I'm more inclined to think that's true, that there's some downside risk here, that we should be at record highs in stocks, despite the fact that we're flirting with recession, we're still flirting with a global trade war. There's going to be a cost to corporate profit, which of course is exactly what should be priced into stocks. I say there's a little bit of whistling past the graveyard here, but so far the investors aren't willing to try to guess what the outcomes are going to be. So they're just saying, we're going to go with it.
By the way, I really enjoyed the use of the word tumult. You don't hear that word very often. Well done.
It's not a 5-letter word.
Yeah, really. It's a shame it's not. Look, I'm talking U.S., but at the same time, unless I'm wrong here, the Canadian market, for everything we're going through, trying to understand where tariffs are heading, et cetera, has been incredibly resilient, has it not?
It has, and there are good reasons for that, not least that if you are a believer in our resource sector, our energy sector, now's the time. And so we're seeing capital flows there that are pretty healthy. We are also, of course, a place where we look relatively stable by comparison. But the big components of our market are resources in the energy sector and then the financial sector, and both are holding their own. So in terms of kind of why we're doing well, there isn't really any reason to sell this market off. Now, we could also be headed for a recession, so there could be parts of our market that could see a slowdown ahead. But in this world where everybody wants to look at the glass half full, Canada looks pretty good at the moment.
So let's talk about one particular thing addressed by the Prime Minister earlier in the week. That's our steel industry. We know, I had someone on from the association that said they'd lost over 1,000 jobs since the tariffs actually came into play. Then you had Mark Carney kind of laying out a strategy for Canada, including penalizing China and the dumping of steel that's gone on here. How significant is this in your opinion?
It's a big deal. I mean, the industry is welcoming not just the immediate support, which would be money directed to workers who've been displaced, but also that effort to take on China. Now, China has already lodged a complaint with the World Trade Organization saying this is offside, that we're just saying any Chinese steel in any steel components globally is going to be hit with this new tariff. But China's a bit of a bad actor when it comes to dumping products, selling product below the cost of production. And our steel makers have had to deal with that for a long time. It's partly why our steel industry is in the sights of Donald Trump. It's because we became a backdoor to their market for Chinese steel. So taking that on is a good thing. It'll help us in the trade negotiations that are underway. But I will tell you that the folks I talked to this week in the steel industry say this is all well and good, but we need a trade deal. We need the tariffs. They've been laboring under now 50% tariffs, right? That's super painful and it can't go on. So they just want a deal done, even if it means some form of lower tariff is in place permanently. They'd rather have that than this high level that they can't live with.
Yeah, so to your point, this does play well for Canada-U.S. trade because in essence what we're doing is hurting China, which is what the U.S. has been trying to do and continues to do all along. So maybe this is the kind of thing that Donald Trump looks at and goes, you know what, okay, maybe it's time to cut the steel tariffs to Canada?
I mean, this really was a bit of, I think, a deal maker's sleight of hand because it may not actually stand up to scrutiny with the WTO. So it might just be that this is a signal to our American trade negotiator partners. Look, we're serious. We hear you. We're doing the right thing. So it might help us negotiate, even though we know it won't stand up long term. And I suspect that parts of it won't stand up because it is a little bit counter to global trade agreements, but the spirit is one that I think definitely will serve our negotiators well.
How much weight, though, when you bring up the WTO, and I think of all the things that Donald Trump has tried to do and continues to try to do, how much power does the WTO actually have to enforce any of this?
I mean, my Lord, ask the lumber producers that question because we keep winning ruling after ruling and it doesn't seem to make any difference. Good question. It's definitely been kind of defrocked by successive administrations in the U.S., but especially Trump. So how much weight does it have? It still matters, especially in a world where you want to be seen as a good actor on trade. That's one of the arbiters, and Canada does need to be able to turn to Europe or Latin America or India and say, look, we behave well, and our record is good, and you can trust us. So I think the WTO still matters, and we do care about our kind of standing there. So it's not irrelevant, but people definitely do ignore it.
So a lot's been made, obviously, Amanda, about this whole elbows up thing. When Mark Carney announced the issue on steel, people starting to wonder now just how up our elbows are. Has anything from what you've heard changed? I mean, we don't hear much of anything between what Canadian officials are discussing with American officials. We're still looking at an August 1st deadline. Do you have a sense that much has changed at all?
By much has changed. I mean, I do think we are in intense negotiations. I think there's a kind of a realism around those negotiations. You heard that from the Prime Minister this week, that, tariff-free life is probably behind us. That gives you a sense of what's going on there. And, of course, we still have this incredibly unpredictable partner who can turn around and threaten 35% tariffs at the drop of a hat. So I think the elbows are still up, but we're now in this period where, it's down to the realism. And the steel industry, the aluminum industry, they'll be the first to say it's all very well to take a hard line, but we need actually to keep doing business. And that is going to mean getting tariffs down, even if they're 5%, even if they're 10%. We can work with that. They can't stay at 50%. That'll put us under.
People keep comparing, of course, to the deal that the U.S. has with the UK, that 10% across the board. Do you think that's, realistic in terms of what might Canada end up with?
I sure do. You could make a case that we should do better because we have a continental agreement that's in place. And as a starting point, maybe that argues we do better than the UK. But I will say that when you look at some of the policymakers who've written extensively about what the agenda is on trade in the U.S. to bring production back home, 10% is a number that gets kicked around. So I wasn't shocked by that number. Will we wind up with 5 or 7? I hope so. I hope it's lower. Will it be 0? I would not bet on it.
And if I can play this out, if that happens, right, we end up with 10 or 7 or whatever it happens to be, as well as our markets have done, given what's going on right now with all the uncertainty around this, is that a kind of a boost, a kick for this market to just continue to go higher if we get a deal like that?
It's a good question. I mean, I don't think it's a boost. I think what you would get is different companies suddenly would be able to actually literally forward price things. And so you'd get a realistic look. Parts of the market would do well. Other parts would actually have to adjust. In the same way that in the U.S., everybody sort of ignored the fact that the profit margin to American companies has taken a hit. Not all of them, not across the board, and that hasn't totally been priced in yet. We'll start to see realism once we get these real numbers in place. And so in Canada, it might be a mixed bag. I think overall good, though, because at least when you know what you're dealing with, you can actually start to make plans.
I just want to ask one last thing before we have to get out of here. We know that earnings season has begun south of the border, and obviously markets look to earnings because that's a sign of how well things are going in the economy overall. Numbers have been so far pretty good, right?
Yes, and we'll see pockets of real strength, right? If you're a Netflix investor, it looks amazing. You are going to start to see tariffs show up in the profit margins. So you might see some bumpiness in some parts of the market here.
All right. And by the way, the one thing I did want to mention, just if you want to just really quickly mention, when you talk about Canada and the fact that we've been doing as well as we have in our public markets, Canadian banks, they seem to be on fire.
They are a reliable investment, I have to say, although they are protected by a regulatory moat, and that could, in theory, go away one day. As long as that moat's in place, they seem to be the place to invest. By
the way, does that open the door? This is something that was talked about during the campaign, Donald Trump had mentioned it as well, this opening of our system to American banks. Is that still something being discussed?
It'll be a good question. It might be on the table in the trade negotiations. I bet that we hold firm on that because, of course, we have seen what happens in the American banking system, and our regulatory environment has served us really well. I think the bigger change to happen in our market would be to financial services firms, fintech as we call them. So not big U.S. banks coming in, but big U.S. financial tech firms allowed into our market. That might be the door that we open.
We will leave it at that. Amanda, thanks so much. Always appreciate it. Have a great weekend.
Great to talk.
Take care.